Hello, my name is Alex Standiford, and this is Headless WordPress is Overrated, the case for the Nearly-Headless WordPress app. In this talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey from going from a person who really just got into WordPress, built WordPress themes in the traditional way for a long time, and then eventually transitioned into really getting into REST APIs and this idea of headless WordPress and more modern headless type paradigms with web development, and then becoming disillusioned with it because of how difficult it is to integrate with plugins, and then coming back and coming up with my own hybrid solution that allows me to work and use headless type WordPress without having all of the disadvantages that come with it. So who am I? I'm Alex. It's nice to meet you. I started working in WordPress in 2009. Most of my time spent in WordPress at that point was just using it, really, just writing blog content and, getting into the fundamentals of SEO and building websites with it, but not really doing a lot of coding. Over time, I started learning HTML, CSS, PHP, and eventually JavaScript as well. And by 2014, I switched my career path from being a mechanical engineer to a programmer and specializing in web development with WordPress. I started out as a freelancer, and I realized it's pretty hard, freelancing specifically. As a result, I ended up partnering with a person named Trisha Gray, and she and I created a business called Design Frame Solutions. And basically, Design Frame allows people, freelancers or otherwise, moonlighters, whatever, to focus on what they love to do. And we do that by basically handling the quoting, the management, the pricing, and everything. And then we just handle and we give out the technical details to people who work with us. So our intent is to basically help people do what they love and love what they do, and transition into whatever it is that they're trying to do. Along with Design Frame, I also work for a company called Sandhills Development, because ironically enough, I actually use Design Frame system in the same exact way that everybody else does. In case you haven't heard of Sandhills, it's the company that created and manages several well-known products like Easy Digital Downloads and Affiliate WP. I spend most of my time working on Affiliate WP, but I do contribute to some other aspects of the company as well. So let's just get right into it. The first thing I really want to talk about is the power of headless web development. And the first thing that comes to my mind, and usually it's the first thing that most people talk about, is that it's lightning fast. And if it isn't actually faster than doing it in a non-headless manner, it usually at least feels faster. And that's mostly because of the nature of JavaScript and its asynchronous processes and its ability to use promises effectively. So with web apps, that usually manifests itself in making multiple requests at one time to one or several servers to fetch data quickly. And the beauty of that is that instead of doing a full request and loading all of the data at once and then bringing it all back whenever it's all done in a synchronous fashion, JavaScript just goes out and grabs it all, and as soon as it's ready, it displays it to you. So it may not load the complete page faster, but it will probably get you the content you care about faster than a typical request. Another benefit of headless is that it allows your site to feel a little bit more like a web app or an iPhone app or a mobile app in general, instead of a website. In fact, a lot of web apps these days are actually built using the same exact technology as what we're talking about here in a lot of ways, via Electron or some other emulator. But even on a really basic level, even if you get away from talking about things at that point, you can even talk about just simply being able to animate a transition between pages on click. Or being able to quickly implement interface elements like menus or a modal or slideshows or anything like that. All of that stuff becomes trivial and pretty easy to do whenever you're working in this manner. But especially those transitions across web pages. So whenever you click on a link, instead of it just loading like a normal browser loads, maybe it'll swipe over to the next page. And when you click back, maybe it'll swipe back, kind of like what an iPhone app or a mobile app does. So, it really does a good job of giving you the ability to feel like an actual app instead of a website. Okay, so another benefit is that there are a bunch of libraries that can help you build your website or build your app easier. Aside from, the actual libraries that we use like React and Vue and Angular and in this case Alpine, there are also a whole bunch of other tools that come in really handy like Lodash or WordPress's API fetch library or date functions, just to name a couple. All of these smaller libraries, or not so small even, allow you to do things in JavaScript that otherwise could be hard to do. Dates, for example, formatting dates, you wouldn't think it would be that hard, but for some reason it's just not very straightforward in JavaScript. So there's a library called date functions that makes that really easy to do. So all of this helps you develop faster. It helps you write things out in a more stable fashion and lets you just focus on the actual features that you're building that nothing else has created. Okay, in addition to that, this is my personal favorite feature of this. It's really easy to collaborate with it. And this is mostly because backend and front-end paradigms are very clearly defined. Like the point in which the responsibility falls on the backend developer versus the front-end developer is very clear because they're both interacting with an API and it's creating this standard way for them to communicate with each other, and that's their touch point. And I like this mostly more than anything for design frame specifically. This is actually why I was so attracted to this paradigm whenever we first started this, because at design frame we always try to set it up so that the people who work with us are able to work with us either on a part-time or a full-time basis. And a key component of that is splitting up and dividing the work in a way that makes sense. And working with Headless in this way allows us to take on bigger projects and more effectively divide out the work without causing a bunch of headaches or overwhelming a developer who's trying to upgrade or improve their portfolio while still working a full-time job. So along with all of that, another big thing that I love about this paradigm is that it allows us as individuals on a bigger level to focus on front-end or back-end technologies directly or deeper. Because if I know that there's jobs out there where I only have to focus on the front-end side of development, I know that I can dive in really deep in front-end and maybe not focus so much on my back-end capabilities. And that just allows us to create better apps, allows us to specialize a little more, and I think makes the web a better place. With that, there are definitely some problems that I ran into whenever I started trying to use this paradigm in WordPress. I'd say about 4 years ago, the REST API was really coming into full swing. Everybody was talking about it and how they were going to use it, and talking about building WordPress websites using React and it being completely headless. And the future of WordPress is in this headless paradigm. And it didn't completely work out that way. There's some companies that definitely do it that way, but a lot of us have kind of just stepped away from that and said that works, but there are a lot of problems that make that ineffective and costly, and we can't do it because the pros don't outweigh the cons. And one of the key examples of that is routing. most progressive websites use front-end routing to build their websites. So you have to literally either hard code or use some kind of logic with a REST API endpoint to define all of the routes and define how that content is displayed, either using React Router or something like that. And unfortunately, that is completely incompatible with how WordPress works out of the box. WordPress was built way before we were even talking about REST APIs and all that stuff. And at that time, WordPress was responsible for all of that routing, and today still is. And by building a progressive web app or any kind of headless type, with any kind of headless type paradigm, you end up running into this problem where you have to basically rewrite WordPress's entire architecture that determines how how to route content, what routes exist, and all of that. And it's a mess. I've built several websites using React and just working in this completely headless manner. And every time I got a little better, and I came up with better ways to go about it. And I read a lot of content and looked at a lot of ways that people have approached this. And to be honest, it all just kind of sucks. I mean, you're just rewriting the same things, or you're hacking in some kind of thing that might work with core, but as soon as you install a WordPress plugin or something like that doesn't work in the way that WordPress core works perfectly, it doesn't work. And then you end up having to fix the problem specifically in your app every time you install a plugin, and it just becomes a nightmare to maintain. It becomes a nightmare to develop for, and it's just not even worth it. So this is the biggest problem, I think, but there are definitely other ones as well. For example, another big one is incompatibility with plugins. Most of the time, a progressive web app just simply won't work with a plugin. Take a simple example. For a simple example, consider Yoast. It's a SEO plugin that you install, and most of what it does is it adds the appropriate SEO metadata to the head tag of your web page. And if you're using a progressive web app, you're never talking to the server to get that information. So you have to go through a little bit of extra stuff just to allow that to work. But perhaps even a better example might be a cart in, say, Easy Digital Downloads or WooCommerce. They expect that whenever you click on buy now, or delete the cart content, or even just loading the cart page itself, all of the templates and all of the information from that is rendered in PHP, not JavaScript. So you have to basically rewrite all of the templates for those sites in React in order to be able to use them. And what you end up with is nice. I mean, it would certainly be nice. It would certainly be great. But you're going to end up spending a lot more time building that out, and also a lot more time fixing the bugs and fixing the issues that will end up costing you money. Or, if you're a developer and it's not your own website, it's going to end up causing you some headaches and possibly some trouble at your job. So, it's not good. Conversely, if you just avoid that and you just use a traditional WordPress site, all of that is handled, because you have companies like Sandhills or Automatic who are spending hours, hundreds of hours a week on their plugins, testing and making sure that these templates that they have built work. And by using headless, you're just completely throwing that away and doing it yourself. So that also really is not awesome. It sucks, actually. So anyway, so now that we've talked a little bit about some of the disadvantages of headless WordPress, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I did a little bit of rethinking on WordPress headless, and how I approached that a little differently. So I wanted to create a theme, a WordPress theme that had the best of both worlds, that allowed me to use this headless paradigm with this web app and all of this fast, snappy transitions and the app feel and all of those benefits, but still be able to have all of the benefits of using WordPress, specifically the routing and being able to use as much of the WordPress plugins as I can, including the templates and all of those things. And along with all of that, I also wanted something that other developers at DesignFrame can pick up and use quickly. And because, we use this system not only on my own personal site at DesignFrame, but we're also using it for some of our higher profile clients. And I'm not doing most of the work at DesignFrame isn't done by me anymore, and pretty much none of the maintenance is done by me anymore. So somebody else has to be able to maintain that. And if I'm writing some kind of crazy custom code in React, it's going to be a lot harder for them to pick up on than it would be if I wrote a WordPress theme and I gave it to a WordPress developer and it's as similar as possible to what they're used to. It might be a bit of a jarring shift for them, but it's not going to be completely relearning how to build a WordPress site. So, basically, in other words, the key goals were I wanted to be able to have all the benefits of WordPress. I wanted to have all the benefits of headless. I wanted to make it easy to maintain and be easy for other people to pick up and work on. So as I was thinking about this, I kind of realized that there are a couple of technical truths from that. The first one is that the HTML just has to be rendered server side via PHP. This is because all of those plugins like WooCommerce, Easy Digital Downloads, heck, even Gravity Forms and Ninja Forms, all your Forms plugins, they all render with PHP. At some point, they have to go through there. They have to go through that system. Even if they're doing some kind of crazy JavaScript or anything at all, pretty much all of them are touching that server in some way in a consistent manner. And the closer we can hug that, the more likely we are to be able to successfully use all of our plugins as we go forward. It's never going to be perfect, but we can try our hardest to make it as compatible as possible. Another thing was that the app has to rely on WordPress for all of its routing, all of the custom post types, archives, single posts, all of that stuff without failure. Again, it's about plugin compatibility. If I'm compatible with custom post types in general in WordPress, I'm going to be compatible with a lot of WordPress plugins. So those were kind of the big ones. And then also the last bit was I realized that I had to have a way to make it to where I could turn the app off on some pages. In other words, I needed to be able to dictate that some pages need to be loaded in a traditional manner. This basically ensured that any page that was problematic or didn't work for some reason, maybe it needs to load a custom script, or maybe there's some other unforeseen bug. I mean, it just happens all the time. We're writing code in a way that most people don't do, so we're going to see things that some other people don't see. And as a result of that, I really needed a way to be able to say, okay, at least for now, load this page normally. Don't use the app. Just load this page like you normally would, and I will figure out how to fix the real problem behind the scenes later. But don't take the site down in the process. And from that, I created something called Nearly-Headless WordPress because I like Harry Potter, and it felt nearly headless, and I just wanted to use a GIF of Nearly-Headless Nick. So it has logic. This Nearly-Headless paradigm has logic built in that allows it to be non-headless, but it doesn't necessarily have to be completely headless, right? So here's kind of the gist of how it works. It uses Alpine.JS. So Alpine.JS is kind of like a diet view JS. So it works off of it works with a lot of the same syntax and kind of just feels like Vue. At least that's what I'm told. I actually don't know because I've never actually written anything in Vue. But the thing that I really liked about Alpine was that it's light. It's really easy for me. It was easy for me to understand and learn. It's very compatible with PHP. In fact, a lot of people in the Laravel community use this tool for the same exact reasons why I use it. It doesn't use a virtual DOM either, which is important because virtual DOM usually means that all of the actual rendering has to happen in the JavaScript. There's a lot of benefits that come with a virtual DOM, but there's a lot of pitfalls whenever you're looking at it in the context of WordPress. So I opted to pick this because of that as well. It also uses, instead of using a virtual DOM, it uses a standard HTML tag called the template tag. And if you haven't ever seen this, it's basically just an HTML tag that says, okay, browser, here is a chunk of HTML code. Don't display this, but keep in mind the information and the markup. And if JavaScript needs it, it'll ask for it. So basically then in the JavaScript, you just say, hey, remember that template? I need that, and I'm going to put it inside of this DOM element, and then it renders it. So Alpine behind the scenes is using that a lot, and it's how it really is able to do pretty much all of the rendering. So really, template tags are just normal HTML though. So you're writing Alpine flavored HTML using HTML template tags and things like that, but you're writing all of it inside of your WordPress theme just like you normally would. So it's kind of this interesting mesh of HTML, Vue or Alpine, and PHP. And then the other thing about this nearly headless paradigm is it uses something called session storage. Session storage is kind of like a souped up cookie, browser cookie that is. And it's easy to access, it's easy to save to it, and things get deleted whenever your session ends. So basically, if you right click in your browser and you click on storage, you can see there's session storage and local storage. And a lot of this app actually relies heavily on the session storage part to actually render and output the content needed to display everything. So yeah, it allows you to display everything, and the content gets deleted when it's done. It's just kind of a really handy thing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how that session storage is actually used. Really, the app that I built is really just an aggressive cache. On page load, the current page's data gets saved to session storage right away. So when I say data, I mean the raw post data from the API response. This is actually preloaded using the WordPress API, fetch API. So it's loaded in instantly. The data is already gathered from the server whenever it initially loads. But so the data is loaded. You have this post object from the REST response that immediately gets saved to session storage. And if this page is ever loaded again, it'll just load it from that session storage instead. As soon as it's done doing that initial one, it then turns right around and it scans the entire page for all of the A tags on the page. And it takes all of those A tags and they all get sent to a custom REST endpoint on the server that basically takes all those URLs and goes, okay, I've got these URLs. Let's see what post ID, or let's get the post objects for each of these URLs and then return those in the REST response. So it'll loop through each one of those links that were found on the page. And if that link has a post, it'll give it back to it and it'll associate it with the link so that the app knows which one's which. And then it returns that response with all of those post objects. And then the app actually takes that data and says, oh, great, I have all of these post objects from the API and I know what links are associated with it. So now I know whenever somebody clicks on one of these links, I have everything I need to actually render this page. And it takes all that and it says, let's put that in session storage. So that's what it does. Saves that in session storage along with the initial page load. all of this happens pretty much as fast as a single request can happen. Obviously, that depends on the speed of your network, but it's pretty fast. And the beauty of this is that it allows you to, even if it's slow, even if it's almost as much as a full second, as long as nobody clicks on any content before that second is up, before the session storage, you would never even know. It's still going to load instantly. And that's because whenever you click on a page in Alpine, whenever you click on a page after that content is retrieved, the app will actually check whenever you click on a link. So whenever you click on a link anywhere, instead of it going directly to the page like it normally would, like a typical request, the app will intercept that click and do a quick check to see, hey, have we already captured that link in session storage? If we have, it doesn't even send the request. It stops right there on the spot. It uses the data from session storage and it just displays the page right there on the spot. So it's instant, and it happens. Yeah, it's instant. In fact, it's so instant that on my website, I actually had to create a transition just to make it feel less jarring, because when you click, it would just be like, bam, So yeah, on click, the URL checks to see if the data is in session storage first. If it is, it just uses that. If it's not, it just loads the page like it normally would. This is kind of the bread and butter of this app, really, because the app only works when the item is in session storage. So if you stop it from getting into session storage, or you put it on a list of URLs that should not use the app, it will just load the page like it normally would. So this is that key component, because it allows me to turn off this app whenever necessary. And not only that, but it also gets around the routing problem, because instead of working and trying to figure out some of the weird generated pages by WordPress, like an archive page, the blog page, or a 404 page, or anything like that, instead of us trying to tell the app all of that, WordPress will that REST response will come back and it'll say, hey, you sent me this link that says /blog. There's no post object associated with that, so I didn't give you that data, because there isn't any data to give. And then whenever you click on that link, the Alpine app will just say, oh, hey, this isn't in session storage. Let's just go ahead and load this like it normally does. As a result, that ends up going to the server, loads up the blog page like it normally would, and then it renders fine. And at that point, as soon as that page loads, the blog page, then it gets saved into session storage. So now, from now on, the app in that session will know, hey, whenever somebody clicks on blog, we have this in session storage. So it's kind of this powerful way to allow us to avoid those pitfalls of the weird routing and all of that. It also allows us to shut it off whenever we need to, and it allows us to get this instant, super fast website on most content. So I already touched on a lot of this, but the benefits of this approach are the instant speeds on most requests. But in addition to that, you also get a lot fewer requests. That's because, again, you're doing this in 2 requests. On the initial page load, you have 2 requests. One being the actual page load itself, and 2 being the request to get all of the posts from the URLs that were scanned. So you end up with one query, one additional query, and one additional request on that first load. So yes, you do end up with a little bit more overhead in that first part, but from there on out, after a couple of clicks, you end up with most of the site is pretty much captured at that point. At least on my site, it doesn't take long for pretty much everything that they would want to click on to be loaded in already. And you find that several requests, several page visits don't even need to touch the server to be able to run at all. And that ends up, improving your server load and making it potentially more capable of handling big swells of traffic. This would be especially true if you didn't use session storage, but instead used local storage. I opted for session storage mostly because I just felt a little weird saving all of the data on my website in a person's browser without their knowledge. I don't know if it's a bad thing or not, I don't really want to get into that necessarily, but it just felt a little weird to me, so I didn't do it. But if you did, that content would never be deleted. And as long as you make a point to set it up so that the app knows when content is updated, it would really dramatically reduce that, especially if you have a lot of returning visitors. As long as you set up the your analytics and everything else to work, it would be fine. Another big benefit of this is that it works really well on slow networks. Just think about it. So like I said earlier, even if that request to get all of the URLs takes a full second or 2 seconds or 5 seconds, whatever. If I'm visiting the page and I'm scrolling and I'm reading content and I'm looking at my options and it takes me, 5 or 6 seconds to find what I want. If it took 3 seconds for that second request to come through and save all that in session storage and it's taken me 5 seconds to find what I want and click on it, who cares if it took that long? Because by the time I'm ready to click on something, it's going to instantly load because it's already in session storage. So it's the crazy thing is, and try this whenever you visit my site sometime. Go to designframesolutions.com, load the initial page, wait a couple of seconds, and then turn on airplane mode and click on a couple of pages. And lo and behold, you'll find that those pages will still load because they literally don't need a network connection to work whatsoever. Now, of course, if you click on a page that wasn't included in the cache, it won't work, but a lot of the pages will work completely fine. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the resources that you can use to get started with this nearly headless paradigm. The first one, of course, is Alpine.JS. That's the library that I used. You can use pretty much anything you want as long as it doesn't require that you do the rendering in JavaScript. You could, if you were feeling frisky, you could build this in vanilla JavaScript even. You could build it in probably in jQuery and not have any trouble at all. The biggest reason why I chose to use Alpine was because it was something that at the time of me building this, it was something I was using elsewhere, and I wanted to get more familiar with it and felt that it was a really good choice for this. So I dug in and I used it. But at the end of the day, the best framework or the best library for you is probably the one you know. So consider that for sure. So yeah, Alpine.JS, the link here on this page will take you directly to the documentation in the GitHub repository for it. Template tags. This is just the MDN on template tags. The template tag that Alpine uses to be able to do all of its rendering and all of that stuff. It's a really cool, and it's just scratching the surface and just starting to bump up against web components and other modern JavaScript things that are really exciting. And there's just a lot of really cool things there. So I encourage you to definitely take some time, look at template tags, mess with them. It will blow your mind if you haven't seen these things before. Another one is session storage. Again, this is one of those things that I don't see it getting utilized a lot outside of pretty advanced JavaScript apps like like Trello or anything like that. We just don't think about it. We think about we'll just let the cache deal with it, and we never bother to try to help optimize our own things. Session storage and local storage can definitely help you with that. Learn about them, look into them a little bit, and you'll be surprised at some of the things you can do and how much faster you can make things. In addition to that, I also want to talk a little bit about Underpin. Underpin is DesignFrame's plugin and theme framework. It is compatible with both plugins and themes, as I just alluded to. And it's a composer library, so you can build it in as a must-use plugin and then just have everything else reference that directly. We do that for a lot of our sites so that we don't have duplicate libraries. What's cool about Underpin is it allows you to... it creates a consistent way to do just about anything in WordPress. So if you wanted to add a shortcode or add a custom post type or create a custom Gutenberg block or create a custom widget or any of these different things, or even registering a script or a style or whatever, it all happens and is always done in the same exact manner. There's a very consistent pattern for all of it. And it kind of gives you more of a Laravel-y kind of feel to WordPress development, and helps just keep you away from needing to remember, now how in the world do I register this again? In addition to that, it also has some pretty awesome things baked into it that WordPress doesn't come with, like batch processors and other tools that plugins, as they mature, tend to need at some point. Oh yeah, also an error logger. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It's really cool. We use it at Design Frame, and we're always looking for people who know how to use it, because of course, since we use it, it would be nice to have more people who are using it with us. Design Frame's website, of course, that's the site that is using this app directly. I encourage you to look at it, click on some things, inspect it, take a look at the network tab in the browser, check out some of the requests that are coming in, look at the responses, take a look at the session storage as well and see how it works and how it acts. I think if you go into the console directly, you can actually type in theme, and from there you'll be able to see some of the things like ignored URLs and stuff like that. Because in the theme, I actually have it set up where you can click on a page and there's a little checkbox that says enable compatibility mode. So literally any page that I have on my site, if I don't want it to run using the app, I can just check that box and it just disables it. And that ends up ultimately getting passed to the JavaScript in some kind of global that you can see if you so choose. Along with that, last but not least, I want to mention the API fetch library, the WordPress API fetch library. This is something that I didn't know about for the longest time, and discovered it in the last couple of months. And it's a WordPress library that allows you to basically do JavaScript fetch. Now you may ask yourself, why would I bother using this instead of just using the native fetch function? And the primary reason is because this API fetch comes with middleware that makes it really easy a lot easier to work with authenticated requests in WordPress. So instead of having to deal with remembering how to set the header to pass the nonce whenever you're doing some kind of, authenticated request, or remembering to pass the REST API URL to it, or any of those things, you can pass middleware inside of the script that basically just shoves that into your fetch requests and automatically just handles that for you, so you don't have to think about that whenever you're writing your JavaScript. In addition to that, there's also a feature that is completely not documented anywhere, called preloading middleware. It's a little difficult to find, but it basically allows you to tell WordPress, hey, whenever you're on the server, hey, create this preloading middleware. Whenever somebody requests this REST API endpoint, instead of actually going and getting that request manually, just use this data here. And as long as it's consistent with the REST API response, it's a lot faster. A good example of when you would use this would be when, actually in the Alpine app, I use it to preload the data on the initial page load. Basically, what happens is, if you think about it, the site has already taken the time to fetch that data from the database. In that initial request, you already have, if you visit the blog page, for example, you've already asked the database for the list of posts. And with the way the app works, what it will want to do as soon as it loads is turn right around and do a fetch request and go grab that data and bring it back which means that you're then asking your server to do another request and actually use it this time. That's wasteful and that slows your site down. So instead, if you take it in that first request and you say, hey, I already have this data. I don't really want to use it, but I want it to be available to my app right now as soon as the page loads. I'm going to go ahead and put it in this preloading middleware inside of the API fetch. And then the JavaScript is smart enough to know, hey, whenever you make a request for this exact REST API URL, instead of grabbing this from via a fetch request, just grab it here. I've got it locally, no problem. So it's really powerful, really useful, and completely underutilized. So I would definitely encourage you to check that out as well. Okay, cool. That was a lot, I know, but it's all worth it. Definitely check it out. Okay, so whenever it comes to connecting with DesignFrame with my company, we are currently looking for vendors and affiliates. We're looking for vendors, which is programmers, writers, designers, you name it. If you're building websites or you're working in website content, we're looking for people who are either moonlighting, taking on some extra work on the side, or trying to build their portfolio to maybe get out of a dead-end job, or even full-time freelancers who are just in the middle of a slump and they just need some extra financial support to help them in their slow times. The intent of DesignFrame is not to replace your job or really fulfill that role at all. The purpose of DesignFrame for our vendors, for our technicians, is to help you with the transition, whatever that looks like, whether that's finding a new job, whether that's improving your portfolio, whether that's getting through a slow time at work, or maybe it's just to learn new skills. Whatever it is, we work with you. We're interested in working with you, and you'll get paid for it. So in addition to that, we are also looking for affiliates, which mostly to bring in more work to us. We have a pretty competitive affiliate program, 20% on actually anything that comes in. So our average project is valued at about $8,000. So 20% of that, not half bad if you win any of that. I'm constantly working on improving the conversion rate of our website. I myself am an affiliate, and actually all of my sales for myself are now working directly through my own affiliate program. In addition to that, we also have a 5% blog content bonus that you can sign up for, where you're able to get an additional 5% referral from any content you write on our blog. So if you are on our site and you write some blog content, and I work with you and we get it published, you can have backlinks to your own content if you're writing maybe as a satellite content or something like that. If anybody within 60 days of reading your blog post converts, you would end up getting a 5% bonus, and that's all organic. So you don't even have to be a salesperson or be pushing links or anything like that. So we've got something for pretty much everybody. So if you're looking for something, definitely connect with us. Definitely join our Slack community and get in touch. As for connecting with me directly, the best two places are connecting with me on Slack onto the DesignFrame channel, as I mentioned before. But you can also connect with me directly on Twitter. My handle is @AlexStandiford. And you can also see what's going on in my life at alexstandiford.com. My website actually has a blog on there as well, but it's actually just syndicated. It's just pulled from where I post on the interwebs all over the place. I write a fair amount on DesignFrame, but I also write a little bit about my RV life. I don't know if you've heard my kid in the background or the cats or anything, but I'm in a camper right now. I've lived in a camper for about 8 months now, and we love it. We live it, and we talk about it too. So, okay, without further ado, thank you so much. And if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.